Howard Law graduate.
Very good.
We're going to mention, well, I made a mistake, so excuse me for that. But she just relocated from Atlanta, Georgia, to New York, to Harlem. And I won't say where she lives, but she lives right in the heart of Harlem, and is a newcomer. And she's being a new member here at this branch. She's going to join today. But when we met, we found some interesting things about her, and I want her to tell you all about herself. I didn't really want to give this up, but this really was a surprise to me. But it was a great surprise, and it was really excitement and opportunity for us to do more with our Jewish comrades and all. So this is Labria Lee.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really my pleasure to attend my first meeting here with this chapter of the NAACP in Manhattan. Thank you so much for inviting me and including me and being supportive. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm excited to be here for the program, but I recently moved from Atlanta, where I was practicing law for almost 6 years at a firm. And I'm from Atlanta. My parents were both born and raised in Mississippi, and when I was young, we moved to a suburb of Atlanta, so that has been home for me and my mom and my sister, and my dad's always been in the fields as a retired veteran in Mississippi. The one thing they instilled in me was always to, get my education, to just, do as much as I can in school, and also do as much as I could to serve my community, and to always, be thinking ahead. So to fast forward, and how I landed here, about 2 years ago, while I was sitting on a board in Atlanta for our mayor, Kasim Reed, I served on a city board there. And I was also helping with a couple of different nonprofits. One city council member in the city of Atlanta recommended that I meet a man who was a black guy who was the director of outreach for an organization called APAC, an organization I'd never even heard of. And APAC stands for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. So we talked for a bit. He told me about how, outreach was a huge push, and, they wanted to rebuild the sort of relationship and the strength that the black community and the Jewish community had back in a time during the civil rights movement when we were really powerful together. And I remember hearing stories about well, to the extent that I knew about the civil rights from my parents who were in Mississippi at the time. My mom would say, well, the people who looked white who helped us, a lot of them were Jewish. And that was the extent of what I knew. What happened is that led me to Israel. So I ended up going on an African-American delegation trip to Israel with 18 other black leaders from the Southeast region who were, activists, city council members. I was practicing law at the time and doing stuff in the community, some media folks. We went to Israel, and it really changed my life. I came back, and there was one thing that I saw, and there was this sense of community for everyone that was in Israel. It didn't matter your color. It didn't matter if you practiced your religion or not. And I saw how complicated the Middle East was and what the issues were that, that people are facing there in the only real democracy in the Middle East. And so I came back, and I wanted to tell people about what I saw. But not only that, I wanted to tell them the story that touched me the most, which was on one night we had a Shabbat dinner with this rabbi. And he welcomed us into his home, and, we all ate dinner and broke bread and wine together. But during that dinner, he started pulling out photos, and the photos were of his father and Martin Luther King Jr. He started pulling out letters that were faxes between the rabbis in Israel and the leaders in our community during that time. And I said, well, why, I really wanted to know and learn more about why isn't it that way today? And it's become a part of my journey, which led me to, in D.C., I met Congressman Rangel, and then I later decided to take a position here in New York as the Northeast Director of Outreach for that same organization. So now I am here, and I'm working with different organizations and different, leaders in the black community to figure out how can we strengthen that relationship again, and how can we make ourselves powerful and relevant today. so that our only story isn't, back referencing to the civil rights movement. And it's been a joy. It's a challenge, and I'm in a new city. I live in Harlem. I'm finding my way and getting used to this cold weather. I apologize for being late, because if I knew my way around a little better, I would have been here on time. But I'm thankful to be here, and I'm excited about the work and, and figuring out and creating ways to have partnerships with our organizations and with AIPAC, and to figure out how can we further the relationship between U.S. and Israel, but also further the relationship between the Black and Jewish communities here at home. So it's my honor to introduce Rabbi Steven Burg, who I had the pleasure of meeting since I've been here. I had my first event under the umbrella as the outreach director on February 6th, and it was a Black History Month event. And it featured Congressman Rangel, who came and has been very helpful, and he spoke and talked very candidly about things. We all had a good time laughing, and it's something that everyone's still raving about, how nice it was to be in a room again and to look around and to see the energy and the excitement by having our communities together. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Steven Burg, who runs the facility where I had it. And I fell in love with this place called the Museum of Tolerance for everything that it stands for, which you will hear. So Rabbi Steven Burg is the Eastern Director of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, a global Jewish human rights organization that confronts anti-Semitism, hate, and terrorism. It promotes human rights and dignity, stands with Israel, defends the state of Jews worldwide, and teaches lessons of the Holocaust for future generations. With a constituency of over 400,000 households in the United States, the Simon Wiesenthal Center maintains offices in New York, Toronto, Miami, Chicago, Paris, Buenos Aires, and Jerusalem. Rabbi Burg oversees the Museum of Tolerance in New York, which is on 42nd Street in Midtown. The museum is a state-of-the-art facility where teens from all over New York State learn the important lessons of tolerance and speaking out against hate, which is what I loved about this place. The entire purpose and goal of the center is, to help address, combat any sort of hate. So at the museum, quite often, New York State law enforcement officers are trained through the world-renowned tools for tolerance programs that deal with racial profiling and many other core issues of law enforcement. And so I think that kind of highlights, I won't read all the rest, but that highlights what the center is about, and we're really happy to have you here speak. I'm glad that you all connected at my event, and thank you again for having me.
Wow, you're a tough act to follow. This is it was really great, and thank you for coming to our museum. I actually wasn't at the event. You mentioned Medgar Evers before. I was at Medgar Evers College, University, for my good friend, Assemblyman Walter Mosley.
Oh,
He gave
okay.
a state of district.
Oh, yeah. Well,
So I had to be there, but I'm glad that we connected. People can ask me, about this chapter, about Mr. President, about your work here. And I'm going to say, look, I'm not sure what happened, but at some point I had to raise my right hand and pledge to bring every month a new member to that chapter. And so I think that means that I'm committed. I think I'll be here for a long time. I think somewhere in there, we've all pledged. You did a good job. We're all set. But I've been here a while. I showed up early, and I'm so glad that I did, because I was really moved by everything that I heard. I was moved by the caring about the young and the old. I spent a lot of my career working with young people, most of my career, in fact, and still at the museum I do. And to hear the love and the warmth in this room and the caring that you have, as I said, for the young and the old, and just everything. I mean, it was from the education report to top to bottom, for the issues of housing, to the pre-K. I mean, I was moved. I really was. And this is a room full of activists, people that get things done, people that don't just sit and wring their hands together and say, oh, I wish this was better. You're truly making people's lives better. And to be in a room like this, for me, is very, very moving and very touching. And in fact, as so many thoughts were going through my mind as you're speaking. You mentioned the Emancipation Proclamation. I have a very, very close friend of mine named Jared Bernstein. Jared Bernstein worked as the Jewish liaison in the White House. He actually has since moved back here. He actually started working here in the city, and then he moved to Washington. And one of the amazing things that he got to do as being the Jewish liaison was he got to attend President Obama's Passover Seder. And after he attended, I called him right afterwards during the holiday. I said, "Well, tell me, what was it like?" And he said, "Well, it was pretty much like every other Passover Seder. Everyone's talking, eating, and stuff." He said, "But I'll tell you, there's one thing that was different. That was the most moving experience he's ever had in his life." He said that was when President Obama read from the Emancipation Proclamation at the Passover Seder. And the Passover Seder, it reminds us in the Bible when the Jews were brought out of slavery in Egypt. And you were talking so beautifully about the bonds we share. Those are the bonds that we share, that we have to share, for everyone young and old. And I want to just, if I can, talk a little bit about where we came from. Because there is so much history, rich history in this room. I want to tell you a little bit how we started our work at the Simon Wiesenthal Center and how we wound up at that facility on 42nd Street. Simon Wiesenthal was an architect from Vienna who, during World War II, was taken with his wife and placed in a concentration camp. He spent 5 years traveling around from concentration camp to concentration camp. And when he got out 5 years later, when he was liberated by the United States Army, by some great miracle of God, his wife also survived. And they were reunited. And they said to him, "Okay, you're an architect. Why don't you move back to Vienna and hang up your shingle and open up your practice again?" And he said, "Look, it's not like I took a sabbatical for 5 years. I want to do something in my life. I don't want to just go back to architecture." He started wandering around trying to figure out what he can do. So he bumped into a bunch of American prosecutors that were involved in something called Nuremberg trials. These were the major trials after World War II. And he said, "I'd like to help you out." And he said, "Well, how could you help us?" He came back the next day with a dossier, a file that he had kept on 85 Nazis that he had met in different camps. And because he was an architect, he was able to draw pictures of them. And he handed that over to the American prosecutors and said, "I think I can help you out." And they welcomed him on board. And then something amazing happened after World War II. Post World War II, so for us Americans, we came back home. We had been overseas way, way too long. And for the Russians, the Iron Curtain had kind of dropped down. And for the Europeans, they were just trying to rebuild and find food to eat. And what you had here were Nazis, really terrible people who had killed millions and millions of people who fled throughout the globe with gold and money that they had stolen. And Mr. Simon Wiesenthal opened up in Vienna, Austria, the only office in the entire world that searched out for these war criminals. Right? And his whole thing, he always said, it was never about revenge, it was about justice. Right? You can't do what they did and get away with it. And I always tell groups today, especially I speak to a lot of kids groups, I said, "How do you think he found them?" There's no Google back then, In fact, if you go to our Los Angeles office, after he passed away a few years ago, we moved his entire office from Vienna to LA. And you can see it today. And I always tell people, go there, look on his desk, you'll see the Nazi phone book that he had. Literally went through it, name by name, address by address, and chased these folks around the globe and captured. He was involved with the capture of over 1,000 of them. Anyway, fast forward many years later, in the late 70s, Rabbi Marvin Heyer, who was a rabbi in Los Angeles, he gets an idea that he'd like to open up a Holocaust museum. Now, to this point, there were no Holocaust museums. The one in Washington hadn't opened yet, or the ones here. And he flew to Vienna and said to Mr. Simon Wiesenthal, "We'd like to build a Holocaust museum. We'd like to name it for you." And he said, "I think it's a great idea, but that's not what I do. I'm an activist. I'm not a guy that's into museums." Right? And that's why I was thinking of him the whole night tonight. He would get out there and make change. He said, "If you want to make change, if you want to do something," he said, "then I'll be on board." So the first project that we got involved in the late 70s was the statute of limitations on murder was about to run out post-World War II in Germany. Now what that meant was you could have operated a concentration camp, extermination camp, you could have killed hundreds of thousands of people, but after that date you could move back home, go under your old name and brag about it at the local German pub. So we got together with him and we grassroots sent 1 million postcards to the German parliament with very graphic images on them and said, "You can't do this." And they wound up changing the law that for genocide, there is no statute of limitations. And that's why for many, many years after, there were people that were held accountable. And that's how we started. And we wound up really focusing on three things. One is human rights advocacy, really around the globe. We recently had a press conference. Elliot Engel also attended your event, was there, talking about North Korea. You know, because if you saw the reports coming out of the UN, the UN report said it was akin to what went on during Nazi Germany. People are in camps being gassed today in North Korea. So we speak out on human rights issues. Second thing we do is we make movies. We've made 13 movies. We've won 2 Oscars, which is a pretty cool thing for any organization. Yeah, we talk. We're based in LA. It was a little, you know, our first movie was 1981, Genocide, which had Elizabeth Taylor and Orson Welles as the narrators. And we want to get an Oscar. Morgan Freeman narrated The Long Way Home. So we make movies. The third thing we do, which is really what I want to focus on tonight, is we did build that museum, but not in the way that Simon Wiesenthal would have wanted. I mean, the way that he did want it, which is we created a museum of tolerance. We took a look at the Holocaust and said, the Holocaust happened, but why did it happen? It happened because of hate speech. It happened because of bullying. It happened because people just, you know, brought out that hate inside and were allowed to just go out and destroy the world. And we said we want this to be a place that talks about that message. It's not a Jewish message. It's not a Muslim message, not a Christian. It's for all of us. And we built this facility. And if you go to the facility, this is, I'm sure, what you picked up on, there is a tremendous amount of our facility based on the civil rights movement. Because in our mind, that was such an incredible movement of strength, of galvanizing people to change. You talk about those pictures. We have a picture of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel walking with Martin Luther King, arm in arm. He was a great rabbi here in Manhattan. And we definitely had to get back to those times. And as you go through our museum, and again, I call a museum, it's an educational center. It's a place where you walk around and you understand the issues and problems of hate. I'll give you an example. We put out for the last 15 years a CD for law enforcement on digital terrorism and hate. Okay? Right now, the internet, although there are many benefits to it, it is a place where people come together. I call it the place where the crazies come together to hate. Right? I tell people all the time, you know, they have the Boston bombers. Where did they learn how to build a bomb? Well, they got it off of Twitter. Right? There was a magazine put out called Inspire. Right? Anyone know which organization puts out Inspire? It's Al-Qaeda. Right? Because their job is to inspire people to go out and kill people. Right? And that is, so we have a whole computer terminal set up so people can understand that. And if you go there and you start to search through there, right, one of the things you'll find, and this is the thing I show everyone that comes to my museum, you will find a page dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King, right, which looks like a great historic page. It's modeled after the real historic page, but when you read it, you see all kinds of racist, terrible things in there. Because what the haters have done is they've taken it, they've copied it, and changed the information. Why have they done that? Right? If you and I read it, we know it's garbage. Because the 15-year-old who's on the computer Googling to do a report stumbles on it and doesn't know any better. And that's what's facing our kids today. We talk about the challenges for kids today. That's it. There's so much out there. And you go through our museum. We have something called Millennium Machine that deals with human rights issue of the millennium. And I'll tell you, I had David Banks down, who's the CEO of Eagle Academy. Eagle Academy, we have an incredible partnership with them. They have a wonderful flagship in the Bronx. And I brought him there, and part of the Millennium Machine, one of the things that we show there is civil rights movement. I wanted to show that to him. And he was looking, and in fact, he and we had speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito, they both had the same reaction. We have another one called Violence Against Women. Right? Violence Against Women. He said, I'd rather see that one. And I showed it to both of them. And he said, I want all of my young men to come see that, Violence Against Women. These are the issues. These are the issues that we're facing. These are the issues that we have to overcome in every generation. And, for me to be here tonight with you and to hear the work of the NAACP, I'll be honest with you, I've known about it, had some interaction, in terms of Washington, other places, but I was so moved that it's the civil rights movement started something strong that is continuing. And it's not just, looking back to what we accomplished, it's looking to what we have to accomplish together. And I want to close, like mentioning two things. Number one is I want to invite all of you to my museum to come anytime. I have some brochures in there. I'll leave my cards here. Whether you come as a branch, come individual, you just tell them you know me, we'll get you right into the VIP tour. So I definitely want everyone to visit. But I want to close by saying something. I had the great honor of giving the invocation at the inauguration for New York City Council, Melissa Mark-Viverito. Right? Who has become a close friend, and I can tell you, I give tours in my facility to politicians all the time, and I can tell if someone really cares, or I call it the ADD tour. They're going, want me to get them out as quick as possible. And she's a real person. She really spent the time there. And I want to just tell you something that I mentioned there that I think was important. I mentioned some words from the Bible. And I don't mean to insult the Bible, but if you look at the Bible, I think something's missing. You look at the story of Adam and Eve. God never tells you the color of their skin. God never tells you if they're pretty or ugly, fat or skinny. You don't know anything about them. And I don't think the Bible just left that out. I think it was teaching us an important lesson that God looks inside our heart to see who we truly are. And I think that as human beings, we have to all come together to really bond and fight whatever is going on out there, whatever our community needs. And I feel tonight, I really feel like I gained a room full of friends. And hopefully a room that, well, I'll bring new members, but, I hope that this is a relationship really that we can strengthen, your work in terms of the Jewish community, and you bring us in. I can't tell you how moved I am, and I hope that God should bless all of you in this room for health and prosperity and strength to do the work that you have to do, and He should bless the NAACP to fight the good fight. Thank you so much.
We'll take three.
Look at the color of the sin.
We'll take 3 questions. Anyone have a question?
Don't look at the color of the skin.
Anybody have no
Look at the
questions?
color of the sin.
Every question. Go on.
What is the most important thing to you when you look at the hopes and aspirations for your organization?
It's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. I tell you, one of the things that we're targeting right now, and we're working very hard on, for me, this is a real issue, has been the bullying issues in our schools. I had actually Philip Banks, Chief Philip Banks, who's David Banks' brother. He came. We do law enforcement, we do education, so we had him each there, and I asked Chief David Banks, I said, what, in terms of things that are going on, what are the things that really, keep you up at night? And he told me some of the bullying issues going on. We're reading about, kids, and I tell people all the time, when we went to school, so if you were bullied, at least you went home at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and you can have some peace and quiet. Today was cyberbullying, and that's the real issue going on. Cyberbullying, you have kids that are 24 hours a day getting pushed around. So if you ask me the biggest issue that I'm concerned about, that I want to use our resources to try and help with, it's going to be the bullying issue. Thank you.
Another question? Question? Everybody's so quiet. Marie Hawkins was at the museum. You have a question, an observation you want to make? Marie made the event at APAC.
Y'all didn't give out no application for people to join us. Break that out, get application.
I offer everyone to come for free, but if you want to. But
Sandra May
yeah,
has a
please.
question.
It's
Yeah.
not a question, but it's just to say that if you have not been there, you should go, because I was there. I come from Hostels College, and I took some students there, and we had a wonderful time. We learned a lot. It was very, very informative, and the people that were giving us the tour were very patient, because we had questions when we were in there. It's a wonderful experience.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
It was the second time I had went there, because I went there as an elected official, and we did the quick tour. That was with someone else. But the second time I went, and after speaking with Brea Lee, while they were having a reception, I went on Dina Goldberg, took me on a tour. And I was able to look at some of the exhibits and the interactive things that were going on, and it blew my mind. It really did. I was going, wow, the members got to get into this. And she had a successful event. She did her first outreach event, and to be a black woman working for APAC, you know who APAC is. And this is extraordinary for her to have this title. And we're going to support you with Brea Lee, because That's what NAACP is all about. It's about finding information, bringing the information to our membership so we can bring the information to our community, because this is a place that every kid in the education system in our city, particularly in our Harlem community areas and our West Side areas, should go to. Just 4 blocks away on 94th Street, a young woman jumped off the building at her grandmother's building at the building at 94th and Amsterdam Avenue because of cyberbullying. That happened about 3 days ago, and she wanted to commit suicide. A young woman, I think she was 21 or 22, but she was young, very young, too young to be jumping off the building, giving her life up. And it's because of the cyberbullying that was going on, and she kept putting down in her emails that I'm going to commit suicide. And my friend said, well, go ahead, kill yourself. And these were her last remarks, her last words, basically. This is right in our own backyard. And this is happening in college campuses all over the city, all over this country. So it's really an important issue. And the Times Museum has opened the museum on Sunday, March 2nd. I told Althea Drazio about this, to allow our young people, and some of you can attend. They'll give us a tour from 10 to 12 on March 2nd to Sunday. They're only open on Sundays during the winter months. During the spring, summer, and fall, they're open Monday through Friday, right, 10 to 5? But in the winter, they're open on Sunday. So this is the last Sunday that they're going to be open. They made a slot for us from 10 to 12 that will give us a private tour of the facility for our young people and for our membership. We're negotiating having our next Women's History Month event at the Times Museum. It is a beautiful facility with it's just really beautiful. And the theme will be Shirley Chisholm. So we're talking about having our Women's History Month there for our general membership meeting. They've opened that door. We're trying to negotiate. We'll get back to you if that's going to happen. But it's a real opportunity. Akil Rose was there along with Tyrone Anthony. I don't see Tyrone. But they also participated at the event. And it's a great facility, but it's also an opportunity for us to engage ourselves again with a community that we fought side and side with. They focus on the issues of the day. When you look at some of the programming they do at the museum, it really talks about the issues that we are really advocating for our community. So thank you, Rabbi.
I have a question. And this question is for either of you. Considering, as Jeff just mentioned, the historical ties that have bound the African American community to the Jewish community from our inception to the Civil Rights era, what do you think are the reasons for the chasm that has taken place over the last 40 or 50 years?
I think that's an excellent question. You know, I think that sometimes when the community is in crisis, people come together more, and you know, when the perception is that, okay, we've solved that issue, and they move on. And I think that, you know, when the Civil Rights era was hot and heavy and there was all that work to be done, I think a lot of people stepped up to the plate. But I think post that, I don't want to say it's less exciting, but people turned internal to their own community's issues. And therefore, you know, they didn't see those bonds between the different communities as necessary, and they became much more insular and focused on themselves. So I don't think it was necessarily something that was a terrible, like, oh, you know, we had a fight and we went our separate ways. I think it just, as time went on, you know, the community just started focusing on themselves. And I think, in my mind, it's time to come back together, because I think we can just accomplish more. And I think it shouldn't take a crisis, and you know, to bring us. And there's not one issue that you talk about tonight that is not important for me, and it's not important for everyone. I mean, the thing, you know, from education to housing to, it was, I'm telling you, I was blown away. I was so happy that I was able to attend that part of the meeting. So, again, you know, I think that, I don't think it was a conscious decision, but I think sometimes things happen unconsciously. And I think that if we can get our leadership, and especially our young leadership, together, we actually have a program we started. It's just a pilot program, but we have a program trying to get black teens and Jewish teens together to talk. And we started the first program, believe it or not, in Macon, Georgia. There's a school there we're working with, and a school in New Jersey, and we did a video conference just to see how it worked. Now, believe it or not, the school from New Jersey came to my museum ready to have a video conference, and Macon, Georgia had an ice storm. So they had no school. You know, if you'd asked me, I never would have guessed that would have been what happened. But I think those are the types of things. I'll give you another quick example. Eagle Academy, right? So I went to Eagle Academy David Banks asked me to come take a tour of his facility. And I came, the night before, I said to my wife, we were talking, I said, you know, in the morning I'm going to Eagle Academy, and my son, who's 17, is a junior in Yeshiva University High School in Washington Heights. He says, oh, I love Eagle Academy. I turned around, I looked at him, I said, you know, where do you know Eagle Academy? He goes, oh, we wrestle against them. Our coaches are friends, they're great guys, you know? So I show up there, I tell David Banks a story. He grabs my hand, he, you know, shoves me all the way to meet the wrestling coaches. Yeah, they're friends with the coach, you know? So I started saying, well, you know, if these kids are wrestling together and they like each other, why don't we get them talking about issues also? You know, I think the sports thing is great, but there's also a greater conversation that we can create and build. And I think that the communities now are at the point where we can start to push that agenda forward.
Thank you.
I want to thank LaBrie. You want to take a stab at that?
Sure. No, I was just going to add to that. I think that was a really good question, and it's a question that I ask because after going to Israel and seeing the sense of community and being welcomed and being able to ask very complicated questions to the leaders of Israel and also to the leaders in Palestine. I came back and I was confused why, one, you know, my community, we didn't really ever get offered the other side of the story that often, and why, you know, not more of us had come together to be engaged on local issues and global issues. And one of the stories that helped me, which I'm young, so I don't know, but to add to what he's saying, I would agree. You know, it's and this kind of made sense to me. During the civil rights movement, our communities were together in a crisis, and once things were accomplished, you know, there was something empowering about leading your own thing for your own people. And I think that may have played a part in, not that there was, you know, any sort of issues or, you know, not wanting to be together, but something empowering about, you know, Black people getting our rights and wanting to, you know, walk and do things and plan things in our community in the way that we wanted. And I think that maybe that too played a part in, you know, the communities becoming more insular. But
can I make a comment?
Yes.
Well, I think there's also another reason. You know, I'm a Jew. I've been involved in this organization for a long time. I'm on the board, and part of what I found is that there's a lack of knowledge in the part of the community of the history of this particular civil rights organization. I've had people come up to me, and there are witnesses here, saying, when I was chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, do you help white people? Or, you know, things of that nature. So this shows a real ignorance in just the general community. So part of the problem is we have to educate people about. And then there are groups like Blacks and Jews in Conversation. There are, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily as insular, perhaps, as you described. It is somewhat, but there are other organizations that have been out there for years working together. But we do need more.
Last question?
Yes,
Oh,
it's a comment. It's a comment. Today I was at Bible class, also at Episcopal Church, and I brought the message that you will be here tonight because we're studying Exodus. So in listening to you about the museum, I'd like to have my Sunday school class and young people visit the museum to just learn about what you were talking about and in conjunction with what we're all going through here in this area.
It'll be our pleasure. My card's here. We have brochures. Just send me an email. We'll take care of it. My pleasure.
So I've been inspired the right way, not inspired the other way. So that was a joke. Let's thank our guest speakers, Rhea Lee, Esquire, and oh, thank you.
I work at the Museum of Black Culture. I do work at, they don't come to my museum, they don't come to our museum. That's the Strikers Club, Harlem.